rare situation is allowing you to buy some ETF stocks for 50% off. Learn more at crushthestreet.com/profit2017.
Hello everyone and welcome in to crushthestreet.com. I'm Kenneth Amaduri and I'm joined today with Terry Ogburn. He's renowned owner and lead business coach of Ogburn Business Solutions. This is somebody who's helping people out there in the real world, helping them get out of the rat race. And I appreciate that. That's the kind of mindset that I've adopted and that I know so many of all of you out there that watch this show appreciate and want as well, are either living or striving for. So Terry Ogburn, OgburnBusinessSolutions.com and TerryOgburn.com. Terry, thanks for coming on the show with me.
Oh, thank you, Kenneth. It's a pleasure to be here, and I hope I can help your guests and with some of the benefits that I have learned over the years.
Well, I've gotten an opportunity to listen to some of your previous podcasts, and you're someone with a lot of knowledge, and you have quite the story starting up your businesses and developing your success. And I want to start this interview off by way of getting to know you with you telling us a bit about that story and getting us all up to speed.
Okay, well, like most, I would think entrepreneurs at the time or whatever, we start with, an idea. We have an idea that we can do something. And so I was living in a apartment complex that had gone condo, and so I had been fired out of the car business, and I paid all my bills up, and I had $118.42 left, and I said, okay, I'm going to take this, and what can I do? I had no car, no truck. Being in the car business, they gave you your car. So the apartments had a broken furnace duct in the furnace room, and I could fix that. So I said, for $15, and every time somebody would buy a condo, I'd say, hey, look, this is broken, and I can fix it for you. It's $15. And it was 264 of them there. So with that, I thought, well, that's about $4,000. And in 1979, that was a lot of money. And so that's how it all got started. And I bought a truck and so forth. And then because I was a technician, and all technicians think they can just go out and start making money, and which they do, but that's not how business works. And I learned a lot from this startup. And one of my sayings is that you hear a lot of times about people who say, I built my business from the ground up, but you don't hear about the people that say I ran my business into the ground. Because 80% of the businesses that start, end up, going by the wayside. But through determination and a bunch of good mentors like Jeff Foxworthy's father happened to buy a condo, and he became a mentor. He was the president of the Tampa branch for IBM, so I got a lot of education from him and a bunch along the way. And then I started understanding how to build a business from the top down. And when you build a business from the top down, you have a better than a 90% chance of success. And that's looking from the bird's eye view down and putting systems and processes in place and things of that nature. And so just coupled with that, in 3 or 4 years, I became nominated for the Small Businessman of the Year. And think about that, an air conditioning business taking off in the middle of 1979. And you think, well, I should have never even been able to launch a business in Florida, air conditioning business, and been successful at anything. Somebody should have dominated the market at that point. But that industry was so, and it probably still is, a lot of service industries are messed up. And so I learned later on in life, all you have to do is pick an industry that's messed up and jump right in the middle of it, and you make a lot of money. And I did. I made a lot of money. Ended up with 12 trucks, 26 people, and I sold it to my employees, and got a residual income coming in, and voila, went on and into the franchising market, learned how to take companies public, learned how to go in and restructure organizations like Radio Shack, AT&T Wireless, Metrocall Paging, Century 21, and some of the bigger companies. So that's a little bit of, there's a lot of stories and a lot of history in that time period. But yeah, that's the Cliff Note version.
Well, congratulations to all your success, and it's really exciting what you've been able to accomplish. And my mind is going multiple directions in terms of what I want to ask you. But real quick, did you know when you started, when you first hit that rock bottom and you had those solutions, did you have a long-term focus at that point, or were you just myopic and seeing what was right in front of you and saying, here's something I can do to just make some money? Or did you have to plan strategically to get out of your situation?
Good question. Give you an example. As most of us know in business, there's a difference between wants and needs. And in the air conditioning business, like most service businesses that are out there, the need is to get the air conditioner fixed or get the problem solved, and they really want you there on their time schedule. So think about that for a minute. I mean, that's pretty common throughout that. Excuse me there. Sorry, call came in. Anyway, it's pretty common. So I went to the technicians and I said, how can we solve this problem? And they said, we can't, because we don't know if we're going to be on the call a half hour or 2 hours or 5 hours. And I said, well, we got to be a solution to this. So I took my assistant and made her a dispatcher. And then so we put a program in place that we could get to your house in a 2-hour time frame, so 8 to 10, 9 to 11, so on and so on. So when a technician got there, he had to actually get permission, Kenneth, to work on your unit. He couldn't just work on it. So he would go to you and say, okay, this is a bad part here. It's going to take me about 2 hours to fix it. When would be the best time for us to fix this? And you would say, well, I got to get to work, so can you come back at 3 o'clock in the afternoon? Radio in, then we'd have another truck or maybe even that same person come back and fix it on your time schedule. Well, you can only imagine what that did for referrals and repeat business, and it just caused the business to blossom. So that's one of the things. And then another thing that I learned from another printer, that guy that had a family move from New York to here into the Tampa Bay area simply because there was no Heidelberg printing machine. Now, that was at those times was a 4-color printer, and so he researched the market, found out where there was a need, and he located his business right here. And he taught me one afternoon that there's a pivoting spot at each one of your businesses, and you're designed to get in that pivoting place. That's where you can watch everything from every direction. That's why I'm not the lead person in my company. I'm the coach for my company. I not only coach, I consult and business develop, but this is where I belong, is in front of the client, helping the client grow. Now I have other people that run my business. They do my marketing, they do my operations, they do everything about my business. I focus on where I can do the best good.
Terry, let's talk about this a little more, kind of where the rubber meets the road. I remember when I first got involved in business, I always assumed I wasn't a salesperson. I didn't have it in me. And I realized that if I wanted to be an entrepreneur, that's a problem. I didn't know that, because I thought I could be an entrepreneur and not be a salesperson, but I found that to not be the case. And I want to ask you, how important is salesmanship in becoming a successful business, a successful entrepreneur? Or is it possible to be like that Robert Kiyosaki, the B quadrant, where it's completely passive? I don't know if that's something you agree with. I find that very difficult to get to or to achieve. Most people are going to have some sort of attachment to their business, and it won't be completely passive. But I don't know, some thoughts on that.
Well, we're all salespeople, and I'm not being trying to be like, all that. But my suggestion to you and to your audience is learn to separate yourself from being a salesperson to a sales consultant. And there's a big, big difference between the two terms. See, a sales consultant, he gets in the middle and he figures out he's like a broker. He finds the wants, the needs of the client, and he puts them together. Sales is very, very important. And even in the air conditioning days, my guys, I would bring them in at 7 o'clock in the morning. We started an hour earlier than any other service business in the area, and we spent the first 45 minutes of our day on sales topic and customer service. That was all we spoke about. So you imagine there's anywhere from 18 to 20 people in the room every morning, and all we did was focus on sales abilities and how to relate to the customer. Because today, and it's even harder today, because back then it was product knowledge, and what I had to teach them then was to take the jargon, the technology part of their world, and stop saying things like capacitors and things. We had to find terminologies that the customer can own. Like, for an example, everybody would say, oh, you can go out and do a checkup on your air conditioner. Well, I coined the phrase tune-up because everybody could relate to a tune-up. And so when we offered our special tune-up price, they knew we were going to do something. But then you got to do something a little extra. When you get out there to do the tune-up or the air conditioning service, we took a little can of wax, like turtle wax, and we waxed the unit down, and we put all the screws back in it. And so when the husband or the person came home and they looked at wow, somebody had been there and actually done something and made it look, a little better than you got there. And kind of goes along with that phrase, leave the world a little better than you found it, so those type of things. And another good sales point for us was that if you called us out and we worked on your air conditioner and you had a bad fan motor go bad, and then a few months later you called us back out there to look at it and there was something else wrong with it, and you say, well, Terry, if I take the price of the fan motor and this other part here, put those two together, I could almost buy a new unit. And I would say, Kenneth, you're right. And I tell you what, you find the model number, you find the price that you want, you give me that model number, that price, I will put that unit in for you, less what you spent on the first bill with us. Now think about that. So I wasn't making as much money, obviously, but that's customer satisfaction, and of course that spreads, and then more and more people do business. So I wasn't thinking so much of that person as I was thinking about the 3 or the 4 or the 5 referrals that person was going to give me. And in sales, that's another thing that we have to understand, is that just because you have a cash flow, sales, does not mean you're making a profit. I know
see that all the time on Shark Tank.
Yeah, I've seen, I took a client on a few months back, and the guy had been selling hearing aids for, 2 or 3 years, but when we dissected his business, he had never made a profit on any hearing aid he sold. But he was about $10,000 or $12,000 in debt, because it kept going into the reserves, it kept going to the credit cards, kept going to the equity of the house. But he was making money. And so it isn't always about making money. It's not how much you make, it's how much you keep. And we should all be keeping 10% of what we make after taxes, not before taxes. A lot of people, make their money, and then at the end of the year, they got to dip into their savings to pay their taxes. So you figure out how to get the customer to pay your taxes. So you up your revenue so that the consumer is actually paying your income tax for you.
Are you saying businesses should be, if they have $100,000 or whatever, $1 million in revenue, that they should be shooting to have $100,000 in profit?
Exactly. And you can, when your guests go onto my website, terryogburn.com, or Ogburn's Business Solutions, you'll see in my testimonies where people have, after taxes, have kept 16, 18, 19, 20% after taxes, because I've taught them something called a performa, and how a performa works. Instead of using just QuickBooks, you have to forecast your income, you can forecast your expenses, and you can figure out how to make sure your revenue is high enough that the consumer or the customer is paying your taxes. Sales is a very big part of business, and like I said, early on it was about product knowledge, and the more you knew about your products, the better off you are. Well, today we need to understand consumer knowledge, because consumers don't like salespeople. They just don't like them. They've been taken advantage of them by them. And so as soon as you start using words that causes their brain to trigger sales person mentality, they shut down. So they go on the internet. You and I are the same. We go on the internet, we go to Google, we start Googling stuff, we get the right price, we know what the stuff is, we know all about it. And most of the time we go into a place and we actually buy in spite of the salesperson. So that's where the sales consulting comes in. Understanding what their wants and needs are and trying to deliver better than they ask for.
Yeah, I mean, you're describing sales from every angle: customer service, the product, over delivery, and I guess it's easy to just condense sales into some sort of pitch or some sort of, delivery of a message, which actually is important. I actually am a firm believer in Toastmasters for people who have issues delivering a message or are afraid of speaking in public. I think that's one of the greatest programs out there and affordable for people who are nervous and want to be entrepreneurs. So, but you're saying it's just so much more than that. It's the whole experience from beginning to end and over delivering. And I think that's great advice. So let's talk about successful habits, things that you encourage people to do, whether it's morning routines or just things to apply to your life to make you a better entrepreneur. Any advice on that?
You bet, Kenneth. First of all, there's 6 dimensions in life, which translates into 6 dimensions of business. There's a spiritual side, which we should be connected. And I'm not saying just your God or your religious belief systems, but you have to have that entrepreneurial spirit. You know what? You know where I'm going with that, right? You got to have, and I can recognize that in a person in a heartbeat. Mm-hmm. And most of the people that I meet are actually technicians. They don't have the spirit that you got to have to strive, that you want it more than anything. And that's part of it. And then you have to have a mental capacity to keep learning and keep getting into books and not, just reading them to agree with them, but taking books and actually Think and Grow Rich is one of the greatest books ever written to help anybody. And I know you're a young man. And most of the younger generation would say, "Oh, Terry, that was written in 1935. That's so old." And my response would be the same as Don Green's response, and he's the president of the Napoleon Hill Foundation. Gravity still works, young man. Gravity still works. So some of that stuff does work. Then you have to have a physical capability. You have to eat right, be healthy. And going back to sales, you can't go out and have a great big meal and then try to go out and make sales. I mean, you're lethargic, you're not on your game. You have to deal with that. And you have to understand finance, like we talked about earlier. It's not how much you make, it's how much you keep. Then you also have to have an emotional segment or dimension of your life as well. You can't be emotionally dealing with rejection. No matter who we are, we deal with rejection. You got to understand to ask questions, like I would ask you a question, I'd say, who do you know that would like my services? I didn't ask you, do you know someone? I said, who do you know? I'm implying that you know somebody that needs my services. You can't say no to that. When I was at Radio Shack, we had a rule that there was a 32-2 rule. 30 seconds inside the door, you greeted a customer with 2 open-ended questions. So, if you know the 6 starting words with who, while, how, why, when, where, so forth. They can never answer that question with a yes or no. You should never ask a yes or no question or ask a question that ends in yes or no unless you're going for it. Now, and a lot of times just in sales, I would go for no. Most people say, well, Terry, why don't you go for yes? Well, there are 3 yeses. There's yes that I agree with you, there's yes to shut me up, and then there's yes for commitment. So I don't know which one you just gave me. So if I go for no, I would say, Kenneth, is there anything wrong with us not doing business today?
Right. Yeah.
And then the last one is social. You have to be social. You have to go out, and there's a great program out there now that's being taught. It's used against us in advertising, but we can learn it, and it's called Neuro Linguistics Programming, and it's learning people like to buy people who are like themselves. So it's a way of you understanding how to become more like the person. In the old days, we used to call it, you had to be a chameleon. You had to change and adapt to the situations, okay? Well, in sales today, it's more needed than anything. Change and adapt to the person's behavior, their personalities, and so you got to learn how to become that personality.
Wow. Well, it's great advice, and it really does take a special kind of person to be an entrepreneur. And I tell my son every day now, one of the things I tell him before we go to bed is like, what do successful people do? And this is something that we had come up with. It says successful people implement and execute. He's 3 years old. He doesn't know what implement and execute actually mean, but he'll eventually look up what those words mean. And I just want him to know that successful people go out there, they implement and they execute, they make it happen. They're proactive, they're taking steps forward, they're building momentum in their life. And you know what? It's for someone who has never gone through that process, there's a disconnect on how to be successful at something. And you are somebody who has gone through the process of being successful, so it can be duplicated. And I feel like so many people out there haven't had those moments where they've connected the dots on, this is how to overcome a situation. This is how to beat the failure rate in the restaurant business, or whatever it is that you might be talking about. So, Terry,
I just want to compliment, before you go there, I just want to compliment you, Kenneth, on teaching your son that, because it reminded me of I speak on stages, and I'm a very big proponent of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I have stood on stages with as many as 150, 200 people in the room, and ask them how many people have heard of the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I would say the majority of the room's hands go up, and then I'd say, how many of you have read the book? And about 80% of the people's hands would stay up. And I would pull out a $100 bill out of mine, and I'd hold it up over my head, and I'd say, okay, I've got $100 for any one of you that can give me the 7 habits in order. And Kenneth, I've never given away the $100 bill as many times as I've made that offer. And then I would say, okay, I'll give you the $100 bill if anybody can give me the habits in any order. And I come close to losing the $100 one time, and that was a person got everything but habit number 5. And that's the most important habit of all the habits, is seek first to understand, then to be understood. See, so we shouldn't be wanting to put our belief system onto somebody until we first understand their belief system or what they're seeing. And that's a big thing. And then keeping on to that with your listeners out there, we start our business as infant. It's a small business that starts out like your son, little guy, and we grow our business, and then we are afraid then to empower people to help us with our business. So we start hiring people, and what happens is new person comes on board, and we give them a task, and they mess that task up. So we take that task back. And then before you know it, we've limited our growth because the people are now they're afraid to implement or execute on anything because they're afraid of what you may say, whether right or wrong. So we stifle them. So not only that, but we're training them to take the ball so far down the field, quit, turn it back, and give it to us, and then we ended up having to take it across the finish line. And so my program is about teaching people how to empower their team to make mistakes. It's okay. Let them make mistakes. Just be there with pillows, so when they start to fall, you got something you can throw underneath them to keep them from bruising their knee.
Those are powerful principles. I guess the last thing that I want to talk to you about before we say goodbye here is how important is it and how great is the luxury of being able to operate in abundance as opposed to just be barely getting by and unable to afford to fail. Like you were saying, giving your employees or your subordinates some wiggle room, but being able to absorb any sort of mistakes or failures. But and then at the flip side, being able to operate in that abundance where you can afford to make some mistakes and you have the money to almost ensure success, right? If you do things right. Any thoughts on that?
Again, a good thought-provoking question there. The easiest way to handle that is that everybody in business should have job descriptions. And it doesn't matter if you're one person, there's several things that need to be done. Just like probably with your business, you're a solopreneur, you have a few employees out there. Well, there's still accounts receivable, accounts payable, bookkeeping, there's sales, there's marketing, all these tasks that have to get done, customer service, administrative assistance. So identify all the tasks that you have, and then put them in play, and then if you need to, put checklists in play. A checklist is nothing more than a recipe card. And if you follow that recipe, you should get you mentioned it earlier, duplicate product. Well, if you outline the steps to it, they should produce the same product for you each and every time. That's how franchising works. I spent 25 years in franchising, took a franchise public, worked in the franchising. That's why the franchises don't fail. And even if they start to fail, then the company steps in and buys them back, like Outback and all these different companies. I was a part of helping some of these franchises get on board. The money is another thing when you're dealing with a capital problem, then you can use my other service, or you can use funding plans. You must have the money to fund your new operation. So if you're going to launch, like I launched into the white goods business, which is the appliance side of the business. So you go get your money, you secure your capital, you put all your stuff in play, you get your marketing stuff done, you find out. Give you one quick example. Everybody knows Sprint phone, wireless phones. Well, when I was with Radio Shack, they wanted to launch in the Miami area. Now there were 6 carriers, and you mentioned earlier you're going to go to Miami. Well, down there there was 6 carriers at the time dominating the market. So Sprint wanted to come in and get in the middle of this market. So they allocated a 90-day campaign that said that they were going to touch the 35 to 55-year-old age group, the predominant market in cell phones. They were going to touch them 66 times in that 3-month period.
Wow. Okay,
think about that. Let's say it was $1 a touch. Now that's through media, phone, any way they can. So it's not just, just radio and TV, but it was every way that they could possibly think of. That's $1 per person, million people. That's $66 million that they went into this market with. Okay. Now they knew that if they signed them up on a contract for 2 years and they multiplied it and figured it all out, so if they got so many customers at this amount with that length of period, that they would come out on the other end with a successful campaign. Mm-hmm. They launched that campaign and launched into 3rd position when their towers took off.
Wow.
But it takes money. So this bootstrapping up, it's a great testimony for about 3 to 5% of the people. But there's plenty of private money out there to get. There's people looking for great ideas, great thoughts that you guys have, especially you young guys. You all got these great ideas coming up. Mm-hmm. Just get the funding. A quick story. I got a Mark Zuckerberg wannabe. He wanted to create a community around real estate investors. He has that community today. We went out and got him $4.5 million, got everything, all this stuff ready, launched it, and now he has the largest real estate investment firm connectivity on the internet.
Wow. Well, it sounds like you're really, really helping people and making a difference. And obviously, you got the the experience to back it up. So it is pretty amazing. Terry Ogburn.
Sorry about that. I've been doing this 11 years. This is the second company that I've taken 10 years or longer, and I've also taken one company public in the middle of that. So,
Terry, I want to give you some time here to just give us some closing words of advice. And if people want to learn more about what you're doing to help and how they can reach out to you to learn more about what you're doing, let them know where they will go and what they'll find.
Well, thank you, Kenneth. I do have an offer for your audience. If like a lot of us out there, just starting up, even for myself, we work 10, 12, 14 hours a day. We feel like we're on this roller coaster that we run up and down, or a hamster wheel where we get on this thing and we exhausted, we step off, we get a bite to eat, we get a drink, spend a little time with the family, jump back into work. If you're working 6, 7 days a week, I have a program, and it's simply just email me. It's very simple, WTOGBURN@AOL.com. Again, that's WTOGBURN@AOL.com. Just reach out to me. I'll spend an hour with you, with any of your listeners, no charge. I'll be glad to share my simple success rate. It's not easy, but it is very simple to get a management of your 6 dimensions of your life. Get all those dimensions that we talked about. I can get them balanced. And as you mentioned earlier, this will help you create an abundance. Most people say abundance, but most people don't really understand what abundance is. And true abundance is understanding that you live a life of joy. And that's when we get to that level, the 7 spiritual laws of success, and when we get to the 7th spiritual law, that's law of living abundantly in joy. Doing our purpose, doing what we do. I get out of bed every day. I never go to work. I work 6, 7 days a week, not full days, but 2 or 3 hours here and there. I don't work but more than maybe 15, 20 hours a week. But I enjoy every minute of my day because my day I'm in control of my day.
Wow. Well, I think so many of us are striving to get to that point. And thanks, Terry, for what you do. And you're an inspiration for myself and for so many others out there. Terry Ogburn, everyone, be sure to follow that link and reach out to Terry for any bits of advice. I know he'll help you out tremendously. Terry, thanks for coming on the show with me today.
Oh, you're more than welcome, and thank you so much, Kenneth, for having me, and it's been a pleasure to be able to talk to you and your audience.